UPSC now expects not just to know the nitty-gritties of foreign policy, but you should also be able to understand the nuances, the history, and the analytical portion of that.
This paper requires some depth, some analysis, and some preparation from your end to score good in GS2 paper.
If at all you are able to decode and break down the syllabus, 50% of the battle is won.
What is the impact of this conflict on India's interest?
So the questions are from current affairs. Yes, the theme is driven from the current affairs, but your knowledge to answer that question, to deal with that question, would be stemming from your static knowledge.
Nehruvian idealism, Buddhist pacifism, and Kautilian realism.
When the things are structured and they are more memorable, it becomes easy for you to retain and revise and reproduce that.
This question was asked in 2020 is that Turkey that year was sanctioned because it was trying to buy S-400.
The power of the argument and the argument of the power.
Yes.
So it all matters. It is not your suggestions which UPSC might be seeking, but your opinions which are shaped by the suggestions of the experts.
Correct.
Whenever you are reading international affairs, whenever you are trying to make a note out of it, just ensure that you are thinking like a strategist and writing like a diplomat. Hello everyone. Welcome to another video of GS Blueprint series. Here we'll be talking about international relation portion of GS2, and we'll be trying to break down the syllabus, the snippets of international relation area. I am Kanishk. With me is Nitin sir.
Hello everyone.
So talking about international relation, we know that with the present trend of rising stature of India at the global level, UPSC now expects not just to know the nitty-gritties of foreign policy, but you should also be able to understand the nuances, the history, and the analytical portion of that.
Yes. And now what we've seen in the previous trends is that almost 4 questions and sometimes even 5 are asked every year in GS paper 2. And this carries a minimum weightage of at least 50 marks. So what we want you to know is that this paper requires some depth, some analysis, and some preparation from your end to score good in GS2 paper. Now, there are some themes which are often repeated. There are PYQs which are often repeated. So that is why this analysis becomes very important. And what we also want you to know is that there is a certain vocabulary which has to be developed while writing the answers. And if you're incorporating those keywords like strategic ambivalence, like hyphenation, estranged democracies, which is used for the US. So if these are the terms which you're using in your answer, then you will be getting some extra marks from the competition. Also, you might have read in newspapers certain expert opinions which are given by experts like C. Raja Mohan, Suhasini, Haider. So use those brownie points to get extra marks by quoting them in your way forward or the introduction part.
This is where the role of GS Blueprint comes into picture. If at all you are able to decode and break down the syllabus, 50% of the battle is won. Now, talking about GS Blueprint, try to stick around till the end so that we are able to decode this global puzzle, this particular area in GS2, and let's try to make it our area of strength. Talking about the first slide itself.
All right, so there are 4 topics that are there for international relations. We'll break it down. We'll break down everything for you. And like we say it in every video, pause wherever necessary, write down those keywords and have your notes prepared. We cannot emphasize this enough. Have what you need to know ready so that as and when you find time in the when you are preparing for the paper, you are able to make comprehensive notes on those. All right. So we'll start from the first topic, sir. Now the first topic is India and its neighbor. So this topic you'll have to first of all prepare for the Indian foreign policy. Now Indian foreign policy, what are the components? What are the evolution? These are the various areas. So for example, in Indian foreign policy, major thing is what is the component, what constitutes of the Indian foreign policy.
The core principles.
Yes, the core principles. And it is said that Indian foreign policy is constituent of Nehruvian idealism, Buddhist pacifism, and Kautilian realism. So these are some things which you need to incorporate in your studies. Beyond that, if you look at this, the evolution part, you have to go from the non-alignment policy during the Nehruvian times till the Gujarat doctrine or the Panchsheel doctrine.
Various phases
Yes.
of evolution of our Indian foreign
Yes,
policy.
and currently what we are doing, the
Exactly.
strategic autonomy or multi-alignment which we are trying to follow.
Exactly.
So these are the things which you need to know. Then you have
I think within Indian foreign policy, it is also important that you cover the factors which are influencing the Indian foreign policy, external factors, the domestic factors. Also, there can be a standalone question from Indian foreign policy. Let's say, what has been the continuity and change in Indian foreign policy? What dimensions, while dealing with the evolution part, you should also prepare for this dimension. One particular dimension, important dimension, would be the nuclear doctrine we have.
Yes.
We have been, of course, after Operation Sindoor, we have been talking about, do we need to revive that? So these are important areas that where India stands, what is the stand taken by India in various crisis situations, and how we are dealing with the world.
Yes, and not just nuclear doctrines, sir. We have to be prepared of all the doctrines which India has in its policy. So, neighborhood policy, the Act East Asia policy.
Major
so these
policies.
are the major ones you have to know. Standalone questions can come on those.
Exactly.
Then you have to prepare on the institutional setup of the foreign policy angle, wherein the MEA comes into picture, the comparison between the PMO and the MEA. There can be a question on what has been the decreasing role of the MEA and the increasing role of the Prime Minister's office in foreign policy making. So these are, I hope, the major components you got from the
Even now we are seeing a new type of delegation going abroad. What is the now evolving role of opposition? Yes, all that you should be able to quote under Indian foreign policy and the components of it. Now, next topic, as explicitly mentioned in the first topic itself, is the India's neighborhood relation. Again, we know what the neighborhood are: China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, of Afghanistan, Pakistan, everything you know. But one way of covering neighbors would be that you covered certain pointers. That what has been the, let me write it down, what has been the evolution of relationship with these neighbors, what has been the major success or achievement, or let's say the significance of these neighbors, their geographical locations, etc. Then within this, you can also talk about the emerging issues and challenges with the neighbors, and of course, a way forward. What can be done, what suggestions you have from your end. Right now, talking about neighbors, we know that very prominent has been this year Pakistan as our neighbor, and from it is stemming multiple issues related to our relationship with Turkey. Of course, the drone related. Then, of course, our recent visit to these 3C countries, Canada, Croatia, and Cyprus, of course, as a strategic posture to Turkey. Then extended from Pakistan is the areas like Shimla Agreement, Indus Water Treaty. There can be standalone question if you are not aware about these properly. Then knowing about Pakistan will not suffice.
What happens is that most of the focus of students goes into revising and learning the history of the relationship. But what we've analyzed is that through the PYQs is that questions are not generally very much focused on the history of the relationship. So what you have to focus here is the issues and challenges, and what are the various irritants in the relationship, what are the dynamics, strategic or the trade dynamics with that country.
But these comes in handy. It is not that you do not have to touch upon that. While you will be explaining the issues and challenging, your introduction part, of course, would be stemming from what are the evolution or what are the keywords associated with that particular country. For example, Pakistan, hyphenation, dehyphenation, then deep state. Yes, all these you
have to
mention.
be very smart in mentioning them.
Exactly.
And getting more marks.
So the questions are from current affairs. Yes, the theme is driven from the current affairs, but your knowledge to answer that question, to deal with that question, would be stemming from your static knowledge. Now, another example or another important neighborhood is China. A standalone question can be there. And there was a question last year from China's supply chain, how it is impacting India. We were seeing a lot of, after post-COVID, we have seen a lot of movement like Apple, etc. move to, were planning to move to, and there were comments from Mr. Trump, etc. All these are important. Within this, there are various issues. Standalone issues like they are supply chain, there can be border issues, there can be issues related to global competition, global south issues. All that you'll have to cover under these headings. Now, Bangladesh is again important. We are seeing a new competition in textile. We have seen military coup, so to say. Same as
of Sheikh Hasina.
Sheikh Hasina has happened, and Myanmar also a lot is happening. So these are about the major countries. Sri Lanka economic downturn, how we helped, etc. Maldives they asked last year. So again, it remains quite an important area because neighborhood. It is where you cannot change a neighbor, as Mr. Atal Bihari said. Now, one important area beyond these neighbors would be your neighborhood policy. Gujarat Doctrine, Neighborhood First policy, it has been successful, or what are the challenges faced by India by having difficult neighborhood. So all that you have to be prepared with. Right. So that was largely about the topic 17.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at topic 18.
All right. In 18, the first one is the bilateral relations. Now, in this, we've already covered the bilateral with the neighbors. Now, what you have to focus here is the bilateral with other major countries around the world. So, countries like USA, country like Russia, UK, France. Japan,
Germany.
You get the idea, right? So
there is no end to this list.
So at least prepare for the G7 countries, I would say. G7 is an important way to go about it. Then any country with which we have a strong tie, historic tie, like Russia, prepare those. So for example, in US, if you have to prepare on US this year, because US has been very insistent on President Trump especially has been insistent on that he has been instrumental in brokering the deal. So hyphenation between India and Pakistan, like sir you were mentioning, it is where US comes into picture. S-400 was very much in news, and where does US come into picture vis-a-vis Russia? Now this was another question which was asked in 2022, I think, where India's defense with Russia vis-a-vis US was asked, right? And then it was,
I think, 2020.
2020, right?
When S-400 CARTSA sanctions happened.
And this year also we have a SOSA agreement, like CARTSA only, like LEMUA and all. We have a SOSA agreement. So maybe asked, a specific question can be asked, yes.
At least it remain a fodder material which you should be mentioning whenever you are talking about USA. You cannot leave USA out of the global order.
Yes. And Russia, again, defense is important. Then you have space agreements which can also be asked.
Exactly.
Right? UK, we have, although we don't have details, but a trade agreement was signed. But
trade agreement remains crucial this year.
Although the details are not available, so we are not expecting a standalone question. Canada can be asked. Now, in the comment section, what I would expect people to tell me, what is the specific question which UPSC can ask on India-Canada relationship, right? So this will tell how you are thinking. Are you thinking in the line with what UPSC's thought process or
exactly
not, right? So tell us what you think question on Canada will look like.
Again, when you're talking about bilateral relations, the countries with which we are cooperating well can be a question. Of course, which have been a contentious issue can be a question, like Canada. Now we are seeing a thaw though. All right, talking about bilateral relations, let's move on to the next part of the topic, that is the regional grouping. Now, regional grouping, again, for bilateral relation, again, you can think like we were talking about neighborhood, that evolution, significance for each other. And similarly, you can have for major countries and also for regional grouping. If you have a look at the world map, you'll be talking about that Europe is an important area. So that means EU is a very important organization. Africa remains important. We are seeing a strategic competition or economic competition in Africa between China and India. Then West Asia, very prominent this year. A lot is happening in West Asia since last 1-2 years. And recently, the Israel-Iran conflict that has raised the stakes for this particular area. You should be prepared for various dimensions and agreements signed in this area. Our bodies, etc. will be dealing with that. Then with Europe, that also comes the Eurasia angle. Then we have South Asia, of course, SAARC, SAFTA, etc. Then you can talk about the Southeast Asia, the ASEAN region.
Indo-Pacific.
And extending to that would be the important area, the theater, that is Indo-Pacific.
Yes.
Now, Indo-Pacific has been acknowledged by our government, by our external affairs minister as a standalone theater in itself, not a no boundaries between there in between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So there can be these probable questions.
And sir, another area which is very prominent this year was the Latin American and Caribbean countries.
Region.
So a lot of visits happened bilaterally. So this becomes a very important, and we are focusing on the e-mobility.
Exactly.
Right. So these countries become very vital.
And
so,
even sir, last year they asked about the Central Asian
yes,
region.
Central Asia was asked last year only.
So this was how maybe you can break down this regional grouping area. So concentrate on each area. When you're thinking about LAC, you should also be talking about Mercosur, etc. All these comes into picture, right? Next is the global grouping, sir.
Yes. Now, these two topics are broken down properly. Global groupings, when it comes, you have to seek out those groupings which are multilateral in nature, not the international. We'll cover it later, but the multilateral ones like BRICS is there, SAARC is there, then you have BIMSTEC is there,
SCO is there,
SCO is there, and then you have G7, G20. These are the groupings. NATO is another question which was asked in 2023.
Exactly.
And then you have I2U2, which was asked in 2020. Right. So these are the groupings which you can focus on.
Again, if you are able to break down these groupings into various bilateral, regional, and of course the global groupings, you will be able to break down the syllabus of it, and you will be able to structure your notes, that how to prepare notes rather than being lost. Okay, let me do that theme, let me do this theme because in newspaper there is an article today. If you have gone through this, I think it will be easier for you to structure your notes. And of course, when the things are structured and they are more memorable, it becomes easy for you to retain and revise and reproduce that.
Yes. And be specific on what you are focusing or your energy on. Like, for example, if you are preparing 2-page long notes on AUKUS this year, so that's not very prudent, right? You have to focus on those groupings which are very probable, which are in news, right?
G7 recently happened between your prelims and mains. It remains important, and there have been
BIMSTEC is in news.
There have been questions that G7 now, earlier it is no more an important organization. Reason being that it is not reflecting the present world order. Now India is the third, fourth largest economy, that it should be part of G7. All these reforms and suggestions should be there. Now, last part is mention is the agreements. So there are certain important agreements. Largely we have covered the agreements under various groupings, bilateral agreements, let's say UK agreement, FTA agreement, regional agreement, if at all there have been there. Then there can be agreement which are standalone, like we are talking about RCEP, though maybe not current affairs, but remains important. You can mention it here and there. Then Trans-Pacific agreement was there, and modified agreement, I would say. Then agreement on the convention, framework convention on AI has been there. All these are important agreements, and
asked in prelims
this year.
Yes.
Ashgabat agreement and international north-south transport corridor is there. Then there are of course agreements like IPEF, Artemis Accord, or maybe the standalone question on the India-US SOSA agreement. So this is where the agreement part tries to overshadow everything, right? So moving on to next slide, that is topic 19.
All right. Now this one has been broken down further into international politics and policies. Read the whole thing. It says of developed and developing countries on India's interest. So you don't have to be bothered about everything, but anything major which is going on around in the world,
how it is impacting.
The question will be asked how it is impacting India. So for example, the current Iran-Israel conflict.
Very prominent.
Right? Then you have the Ukraine problem. Now the question won't be standalone about the Ukraine or the Iran-Israel, but what is the impact of this conflict on India's interest? Right? Then you have the Middle East problem as a whole. Then what is the US and China rivalry, the revisionist and the status quoist power, which is again a question which was asked by UPSC. Then what is the implication of that dynamic on the whole Indo-Pacific? What is the implication of Indo-Pacific rivalry on India's interest? Right? Then you have globalization, or rather we can say deglobalization.
Deglobalization.
The trade barriers which are being created, especially by US and in some European
And our
countries.
economic survey this year called
Yes.
globalization as now, rather than it going for globalization, we are going for geo-economic fragmentation.
Yes.
The end of globalization, as a UK Prime Minister also declared.
Then some topics like you have migration as a major problem, climate change as a major
Exactly.
problem,
Connectivity.
nuclear disarmament as a major problem. So these are the topics you have to prepare.
Now, within the international politics and policies, you should also be referring to the broader area that how we are doing as a world order. Is there a need for reform in the world order? What is the role of, let's say, what have been the phases in the world order? Pre or Cold War phase, post Cold War phase, or the emerging world order? What is the role of India in that world order? What are the opportunities and challenges for India in that world order? Talking about world order, you should also be talking about what is multilateralism, what is minilateralism. All these are keywords that can be a standalone question. And as sir also talked about, there can be a question between the decline of US hegemony, US China conflict, the new world war, new Cold War, is it emerging or not?
And sir, what we suggest to our students here in FRC and AWFG is that don't read the whole book right now, is not the time.
Exactly.
But books like Why Bharat Matters by Jaishankar. So get good quotations from those books and use them in your conclusions. So that will fetch you some extra marks.
Yes, it adds authority to, again, the power of the argument and the argument of the power.
Yes.
So it all matters. It is not your suggestions which UPSC might be seeking, but your opinions which are shaped by the suggestions of the experts.
Correct.
Right now, next section within this is explicitly mentioned, that is the Indian diaspora. There have been multiple questions on Indian diaspora. That is the reason it has been especially or explicitly mentioned. There have been multiple questions on specific dimensions of Indian diaspora, that Indian diaspora in West, Indian diaspora in American, European region, Southeastern region, West Asian region. So you have to focus on this particular area. Within this, I would want that you should know the definitions and various, let's say, principles of Indian diaspora, various dimensions.
Evolution.
With this evolution, the data also. Be ready with the data points for Indian diaspora. To talk about data, you should be referring to the recent Standing Committee on External Affairs report, which is called as the Indian Diaspora Overseas. So you can quote that report here and there. You can also quote the Standing Committee of Parliament, what has been the criticism. Now, talking about criticism, you should broadly prepare that what are the issues and challenges associated with the Indian diaspora.
Yes.
Do we have a diaspora engagement policy? If not, why? Should there be? What is your unique suggestion to it? And what is the way forward? Again, an important question, and I would suggest that you try to guess that what area is left and what can, let's say, Indian diaspora in FIPIC countries, in African countries, or maybe in UK. That how it is shaping or influencing India's foreign policy for that particular country or region.
What have been their contributions in that particular country?
Exactly.
It has asked about US, the contribution of diaspora in the US, policy, politics and the economy.
Exactly.
So I have a few points ready.
How diaspora can be a soft power.
Yes.
All these are dimensions.
Southeast Asia was asked. West
Exactly.
as a whole, West as a whole concept was used in 2023. So be ready
So again,
with areas.
important area which you should not miss, right? Talking about topic 20, international relations, international institutions. So we have divided international organizations into two areas. One is, of course, the UN system. And the other is the other organization beyond the UN system. Now, UN, again, most prominent international organization, and a lot has been asked about UN. There was a question last year from UN, and there was a specific question, not a general question of the performance. It was a question for UNSC Counter-Terrorism Committee. So it
committee
is
within a committee.
Exactly.
They're drilling down so much. You might prepare something on UNSC, but they are going into a committee within the
exactly.
UNSC. So be very specific. on
they have
what to
also
prepare.
earlier, I think it was in 2017 or 18, they have asked about one particular commission of UNESCO.
Yes.
Right. So you should be prepared for these topics in deep. While talking about UN system, you should be able to break down what is UN system, what is the structure, what are the 6 principal organs, what are the different role of those organs, how has been the performance of one particular organ. Let's say when we are talking about UNSC, how successful successful it has been. Then within USC, there is always a debate around UNSC permanent seat for India. Yes, then what are the contentious issues related to ICJ? How is it different from ICC, International Criminal Court, always in news? UNGA deliberative body, and broadly what has been the success rate of UN? Why is it not able to control the conflicts which are happening in different parts of the world, and why is it not able to challenge the global or give a solution to global challenges, as sir also talk about climate change, etc. So that is instrumental. Within UN system are also 15 principal agencies. I know that's a lot to ask for, but at the same time, there are certain important agencies you should be focusing on.
At least the roles and responsibilities, the charter.
And I would suggest you go to the homepage of each of these agencies and see what is the mandate. It specifically talks about structure and mandate. So see from the original source that what is the structure and what is the mandate and objective of that organization. Then go for, of course, the analytical part of it. So that was around UN system.
Some things which are in news, see, you have to prepare everything. Some things which were in news, UNSC was in news because Pakistan was a non-permanent member and it got the reference to some terrorist removed. And then you have UNCTAD, which is celebrating the 60th anniversary.
Exactly.
Then in ICJ, you have an Indian ex-Supreme Court judge who is the chairperson, right? So these are some things which are important. Otherwise, what we want you to do is focus on everything. You never know what UPSC might end up asking. Now, in some other areas which you need to look into is, let's say, Indian International Meteorological Organization, IMO, which was asked in 2023, something very unexpected. So this must give you a clue to prepare on other things such as the ILO, the International Labour Organization, the WHO, again, not so much in news right now, but during the COVID time, we remember we were expecting it so much and it ended up asking also. And direct question.
WTO.
Yes, WTO.
Remains important. US has withdrawn.
Always important. Every alternate year or 2-3 years later, UPSC does ask a question on WTO. Then you have FATF, which is in news. You have... WMO might be important, NDB might be important, IAEA, which is due to Iran,
exactly,
might be important.
Due to Iran and also India-Pakistan conflict. Indian Defense Minister has quoted that IAEA should monitor what is happening with nuclear energy in Pakistan.
Correct.
Yes. So IAEA is again important. You can also talk about, as sir mentioned, NDB. You can also talk about Asian Development Bank or AIIB. What is the difference between mandates and structure and how they have been successful. Again, we have gone for reforming our model BITs, bilateral investment treaties. So that is one question you should also be focusing on.
Yes.
Now we are done with the topics broadly. That is the basic blueprint. Let's have a look at certain questions from previous years and of course some from our test series. Talking about PYQ, we know that
so what we want students to see here is what the pattern of UPSC has been in asking the questions. Look at the pattern.
So this particular slide highlights the importance of PYQ. This is where in 2021 UPSC asked a question from SCO. It was in news that year, and of course the question was awaited since India and Pakistan joined in 2017. So after a couple of years, they asked the objective, the aims. This is again what I was mentioning, that you should be ready with the mandate and objective. If you have specifically prepared this, you will be easily able to address the first part at least. Yes. Then after 2 years, it again asks the same question or at least the similar theme within 2 years. Now, what changed is again, it became current affairs. Iran also joined that year. So whatever is in current affairs, your theme would be repetitive, but you have to tweak your content. As I continue saying, if at all you have prepared content on one thing, you have to tweak according to the current affairs in this low-hanging fruit of GS2.
Yes.
Now, next slide, sir.
Now see, like we said that some themes are always repeated. So we have talked about the India's engagement with the African nations, and this is what we were expecting that year because of a very significant visit. And this question was asked in AWFG. Next slide, please. And then that same question ended up being there in the UPSC's paper also. So this is where what we want you to understand is that you can be smart enough to guess a few questions here and there. If
Exactly.
something is very much in news, you can guess those things as well. Now, in this question, what we want you to understand is how do you make that guesswork good, right? 2020 question, it talks about Indo-Russian defense deals, right? And significance of Indo-US defense deals over the Indo-Russian defense deals. Why this question was asked in 2020 is that Turkey that year was sanctioned because it was trying to buy S-400, and India was exempted through CAATSA or for buying S-400s. So this became a very prominent news. And see, this question itself is very difficult. But because the news was so prominent, this question ended up being there. So if you are aware of the analytical part of
Exactly.
this news, you would have been able to answer this
So
question.
this is where the role of current affairs comes into picture,
Yes.
that you will be able to maybe identify the theme. But again, I highlight one thing, I'll be repetitive, that do not undermine the role of the static knowledge you have for international relation. For this question also, if you are aware about Indo-Russia relation, if you are aware about Indo-US relation, then only you will be able to do justice to the answer. Right?
All right.
So I think that was it from our side for international relation portion. Again, we'll be coming up with the next videos from GS3.
Yes.
And for international relation, as sir initially mentioned, make sure that you are mentioning the keywords required. As sir also mentioned,
Really
certain
hope this was helpful because we have broken down a lot of topics. Pause this video and write it down, make your notes on these. And really hope it will be helpful to get a hold of those 4 questions which will come definitely in your
try to
examination.
replicate those keywords in your notes. Then only they'll be. It is not that what you read and you'll be able to retain.
Correct.
So at the end, I would say that whenever you are reading international affairs, whenever you are trying to make a note out of it, just ensure that you are thinking like a strategist and writing like a diplomat.
All right. Thank you so much.
All the very best.